Section 1. The Underestimation, April 6, 1945. Off the coast of Okinawa, Pacific Ocean. The dawn is a thin, bruised line on the horizon as the aircraft carrier USS Bunker Hill rides the uneasy swells. The sea is calm, but the air crackles with a tension that even the most seasoned sailors cannot ignore. A pale orange glow washes across the flight deck, glinting off metal, painting long shadows around the Hellcats being armed for the morning K-Pay. Combat Air Patrol. Lieutenant Commander James "Red" Harrington stands near the island structure, his gloved hands wrapped around a steaming mug of Navy coffee that has long since turned cold. The wind bites through his flight jacket, carrying with it the oily scent of aviation fuel. He narrows his eyes against the rising sun, scanning the eastern sky the way he has for months. Out of habit, out of duty, out of the quiet dread that something is changing out here in the far reaches of Japan's empire. Behind him, the deck comes alive with the metallic clatter of ordnance carts, shouted instructions, and the rhythmic roar of engines being warmed. Sailors swarm around the fighters in tight choreography, each man absorbed in his task. Harrington takes a slow breath. Through the hum of activity around him, he hears again the words that have haunted him since the briefing the night before. They're calling them Kamikaze. The word still feels alien, too dramatic, too desperate. The Japanese, masters of discipline, of intricate battle planning, resorting to suicide. Harrington had almost laughed when he first heard accounts months earlier. A handful of pilots, green or cornered, diving their aircraft because they had no escape. It wasn't unheard of. But organized, systematic. That had seemed absurd. Surely the enemy would never squander trained aviators in such a reckless, wasteful fashion. But then came later Gulf, and Luzon, and the trickle of reports that grew into something else entirely. Waves of aircraft diving out of the clouds, not breaking off when hit, pressing forward even as they bled smoke and fire. And now, Okinawa. Harrington shifts his weight as a Hellcat taxis forward toward the catapult, its engines sputtering to a deeper roar. The pilot, Ensign Peter Malloy, just 21, freckles still scattered across his cheeks, gives Harrington a nervous grin. Harrington forces a confident nod in return. Malloy's grin is too thin. Everyone knows why. Japanese airfields on Kyushu are close. Too close. And last night's intelligence briefing had carried a note of unease that senior officers tried to hide but failed. Sightings of large formations, intercepts increasing, strange maneuvers, aircraft that don't retreat. A new pattern. Combat Information Center officers had whispered in corridors, something big is coming. And Task Force 58, the great spearhead of American naval air power, was right in its path. Harrington wipes his hand across his brow despite the cool air. The responsibility weighs heavier than any helmet. He's flown 94 combat missions. He's told younger pilots that the Japanese air arm is a shadow of what it once was. Undertrained, underfueled, under-equipped. But deep down, he isn't so sure anymore. The enemy seems to be turning its very weakness into an infernal strength. Pilots who require minimal time to train flying bombs that don't need to return. Stripped-down aircraft carrying heavy loads of high explosives welded directly into the fuselage. One goal, hit. The catapult officer signals. Malloy revs the engine. The Hellcat shudders like a living thing wrestling to break free. Then, a violent jerk. A burst of steam, and the fighter streaks off the deck into the coloured sky. Harrington watches until the aircraft becomes a speck, then vanishes into the glow. A klaxon suddenly wails, slicing through the morning. All hands, general quarters, air raid warning, vector 097, high altitude, inbound. Harrington's heart clenches. Already? He reaches the ready room in seconds, the corridors vibrating beneath his boots. Pilots shout updates, pull on harnesses, slam down goggles. Mechanics scramble. The ship trembles as the number 2 elevator lowers another Avenger torpedo bomber to the hangar. Inside the Combat Information Center, the air is thick with overlapping voices. Multiple contacts, speed high, altitude descending, Estimate at least 15 bogies. Possible outbound from Kyushu? Rear Admiral Mark Mitcher, commander of Task Force 58, is not on Bunker Hill today. He is aboard his flagship, USS Bunker Hill's sister carrier, USS Bunker Hill. But his directives carry through the task force like electric current. He has spent weeks trying to convince Washington that the kamikaze threat is real, that these attacks are not random, not flailing acts of a dying enemy, but a deliberate operational doctrine. And yet, even Mitcher doesn't know what's coming this morning. A junior radar operator hunched over his console stiffens. "Sir, we've got a breakaway." Define breakaway. One bandit just detached, heading directly toward us. Lieutenant Commander Harrington stops mid-step. A chill runs up his spine. The CIC dim lights cast long shadows across the crew. A coastal wind shudders the hull as the operator continues in a tight, cracking voice. He's descending fast, no evasive pattern. A silence falls. The kind of silence that happens when every man suddenly recognizes something he's never seen but immediately understands. "That's a kamikaze," someone whispers. The ship-wide speakers erupt. "All batteries, stand by! Incoming dive bomber, angle 60 degrees!" Up on the flight deck, the wind screams. Gunners swivel Oerlikon, 20mm cannons, toward the eastern sky. The 40mm Bofors crews snap belts into place. The first flecks of tracer fire streak upward, carving red and white arcs through the morning. And then they see him, a Nakajima Ki 43 Oscar, sunlight flashing off its wings. The aircraft plunges toward Bunker Hill with unnatural determination. It flies through the smoke bursts, through the flak blossoms, through the frantic wall of fire. It does not dodge. It does not break off. It does not fear. Harrington looks up as the Oscar roars overhead, missing the deck by a razor margin. The explosion comes seconds later from the destroyer USS Ramsey in the outer screen, a tremendous flash that rises like a newborn sun. The blast reaches the carrier as a rolling concussion. The kamikaze had missed Bunker Hill, but he had found a target. Harrington grips the edge of the hatchway, knuckles white. The deck still trembles under the dying echoes of the blast. No one speaks. No one breathes. At last, Harrington murmurs the words forming in every man's mind. "They're not just probing us anymore." The morning light grows brighter, and as more radar contacts appear, more than the operators have ever seen at once, one truth settles upon Task Force 58 like a shadow stretching across the sea. The Allies had underestimated this threat, and now the reckoning was beginning. Section 2. The Gathering Storm. April 6, 1945. 07:48 hours. The sky above Task Force 58. The smoke rising from the shattered remains of US Ramsey drifts across the waves like a mourning shroud. What began as a single suicide attacker is quickly devolving into something far more sinister. The air pulses with the echo of distant engines, faint at first, like insects humming on the edge of perception, then steadily swelling into a discordant roar rolling across the horizon. Lieutenant Commander James "Red" Harrington shoves out onto the port catwalk, the metal deck vibrating beneath his boots as the ship surges through the heavy seas. Gunners reload frantically, their movements sharp, rehearsed, but spurred tonight by a new and unfamiliar fear. In every direction, the task force vessels tighten their circular screening formations, destroyers pushing outward like wolves taking up guard positions. A shout rises from the starboard side. "Eyes up! Bogies diving out of the sun!" Harrington turns sharply. A formation of dark specks is descending from a cloud bank. Too steep, too fast, too deliberate. His throat tightens. Mitcher had warned of this. After 3 years of grinding attrition, Japan's conventional air power had bled out, but desperation had birthed a terrible invention. Aircraft stripped of armor and radios. Pilots with only basic instruction. Engines tuned for a single flight, one way, straight toward an American ship. One plane had already slipped through, a single crack in the defense network, and a destroyer had vanished. Now the crack was widening. The first Japanese fighters break out of the glare with terrifying clarity. A6M0s, white paint flaking, symbols hand-painted, bombs slung beneath their fuselages like swollen tumours. Others appear behind them. Ki-27 Nates, Ki-43 Oscars, even a lumbering Ki-48 Lily bomber, labouring to keep pace with its escorts. Harrington's breath catches. These aren't reconnaissance flights. Not a scattered squadron. This is an organised strike, a massed wave. Someone in the gun crews mutters, "Oh hell, here they come." And then the sky erupts. The forward 5-inch guns of Bunker Hill thunder to life, pitching black smoke into the wind. The concussion rattles Harrington's teeth, but he doesn't move. The carriers, the pride of the Pacific Fleet, have drilled for years to fend off air attacks. Nothing, however, has trained them for this. On the flight deck, pilots sprint toward their planes at full speed, even those not scheduled for cap. Anyone who can get airborne must. The carrier's deck crews scramble to clear space. Several Hellcats sit poised on the bow catapult, their engines screaming as if sensing the danger. "Launch the cap! Launch them now!" a deck officer bellows. Steam vents blast upward in violent white plumes as the first catapult fires. A Hellcat lurches forward, its wheels leaving the deck just as a distant Zero dives through the flak screen. Tracer rounds streak upward, stitching the sky in frantic arcs. One Zero disintegrates mid-dive, wings shearing off like torn paper. Another keeps coming, sunlight glancing off its canopy, the pilot visible. Head lowered, hands rigid on the stick, intent, unbreakable. A 40mm shell catches its underside. The Zero buckles, smoking but does not fall. Harrington inhales sharply as the doomed aircraft angles straight toward the cruiser Baltimore. The impact is deafening. Fire blossoms upward, a geyser of flame and metal. Shards rain into the sea. "Baltimore hit!" someone shouts. "Port quarter!" But there is no time to react, no time to mourn. Another shriek of engines rises over the carrier. Harrington turns just in time to see 4 more aircraft sweep low over the waves. So low, their propeller wash kicks spray and glittering fans behind them. "Brace! They're coming around again!" The ship rattles as the guns pivot, spitting fire. One Kamikaze is blown apart in a burst of flame. A clean kill. If any kill can be clean, when the pilot had no intention of returning home. The second climbs suddenly, then plunges toward the destroyer USS Monson. The hit is brutal. A plume of smoke, a rising coil of orange fire, the echo of the explosion vibrating across the carrier's railings. 2 more. The third plane banks toward Bunker Hill herself. Harrington's pulse spikes. The plane's engine wails like a creature in agony, closing the distance too quickly. Miraculously, flak rips into its wing root, snapping it clean off. The aircraft spirals violently into the sea, disappearing in a pillar of spray. The fourth fighter actually makes it through the first barrage, but seconds later, a Hellcat diving in from above slices it apart with a burst of 50 caliber rounds. The wreckage falls like burning confetti. In the combat information center below, chaos reigns. Radio men shout updates. Radar operators scramble to separate friendly and enemy contacts on their screens, their voices strained and cracking. Enemy bearing 085, moving fast. More bogies lifting off Kyushu. Count increasing, 30, now 40. Jesus, they're still coming. Harrington's chest tightens as the full realization settles over him. This is not a raid, not a sortie. It is a coordinated, massive suicide assault. Operation Kikusui, the floating chrysanthemum, the first of 10 waves Japan will unleash in its last, terrible bid to repel the American invasion of Okinawa. Though Harrington does not yet know its name, he can feel the signature of something unprecedented pressing upon the task force. Up above, Ensign Malloy and the other Hellcats begin engaging the next group of inbound attackers. Contrails twist and curl, machine gun bursts flashing in the distance. The sky is a cage of fire. A nearby explosion rocks Bunker Hill so hard, Harrington nearly loses his footing. Smoke rises from the destroyer bush, hammered by two kamikazes in rapid succession. The ship lists heavily, flames licking its superstructure. Men aboard Bunker Hill watch helplessly. "I've never seen anything like this," Harrington murmurs. A senior chief beside him nods grimly, his jaw clenched. "Sir, none of us have." The air reeks of cordite, burning fuel, and the sharp sting of ozone. The ocean around them boils with falling debris. Waves slap against the hull, stained with oil. Over the radio net, fragmented cries and terse commands filter through. "Lose power. Engine room flooded. Taking water. Fire spreading. Need rescue craft. Multiple men overboard." The scale of the assault is monstrous, far beyond the sporadic kamikaze attacks Task Force 38 had faced months earlier at Luzon. This is different, organized, deliberate, horrifyingly effective. Mitch's fleet had prided itself on its layered defense system: cap fighters, picket destroyers, heavy cruisers, then the carriers themselves at the core. But now the outer layers are collapsing. The radar picket destroyers, first in line, are being torn apart. As the control tower barks new orders, Harrington feels the ship turning slightly, adjusting position. The wind shifts across the deck. Another Hellcat slams down from its landing approach, skidding hard but controlled. It's low on fuel. Its ammunition is spent. A deck crew rushes forward to refuel and rearm it. They know what's coming next. The gunnery chief's voice blasts over the 1MC. "Stand by for another attack run. All hands, prepare for waves 2 and 3. Waves, not planes. Waves. A terrible truth locks into place. The Japanese plan is not to overwhelm American gunners by speed or stealth, but by sheer, unending quantity. A sailor beside Harrington whispers, "How many do they have left?" Harrington doesn't answer. The truth is sickening. As long as Japan has aircraft, pilots willing to die, and explosives to strap beneath their wings, this hell will continue. More engines howl in the distance. The second wave is forming. And Task Force 58, still reeling from the first blows, steels itself for a storm unlike any the Pacific War has yet unleashed. Section 3. The sky turns to fire. April 6th, 1945. 0912 hours. Central sector of Task Force 58's defensive ring. The roar of the first assault has not yet faded when the second wave announces itself with a low, distant rumble that crawls across the water like rolling thunder. Smoke drifts in long, black tendrils from the battered destroyers on the picket line, and the sky, once a clear morning blue, has curdled into a chaotic tangle of contrails, ash, and oily firestorms. Lieutenant Commander James "Red" Harrington stands on Bunker Hill's port catwalk again, sweat clinging to his temples despite the biting wind. His ears ring from the relentless gunfire. His lungs burn from the acrid stench. His heart pounds with an ache that feels far too heavy for one morning. Below him, the ocean hisses with flaming wreckage. Planks, twisted metal, the occasional life jacket drifting alone. A sailor in a rescue craft pulls a half-conscious crewman from the water, a survivor from the late USS Bush. The destroyer has been mortally hit, and though its crew fought with violent desperation, the vessel is sinking by the bow, listing sharply. All around, the fleet tightens its formation, like a wounded animal encircling to protect its heart. Then Harrington hears it. Faint at first, a crawling buzz. "Engine noise," he mutters. A deck officer beside him lowers his binoculars, jaw tightening. Second wave, and it sounds bigger. Within seconds, CIC confirms it. Multiple bogies inbound from bearing 040. Count 50 plus. Maybe more. The words, "maybe more," settle like stones in every stomach. The ship's alarm blares again. Not the shrill edge of panic, but a deep, throbbing warning tone, as if the hull itself is groaning under the strain of what's coming. Harrington feels his pulse hitch. The kamikazes have regrouped, and they're aiming for the kill. Up in the sky, Ensign Peter Malloy wrestles with a trembling Hellcat streaked with bullet holes. He circles high above the fleet, oxygen mask tight against his face, scanning the horizon. His fuel gauge dips lower than he wants to admit. His wingman, Lieutenant Joe Talmadge, breaks radio silence with a static cracked whisper. "Jesus, Pete, you seeing this?" Malloy's breath fogs his canopy as he peers toward the incoming swarm. At first, the aircraft look like a single drifting cloud. Then the cloud breaks into dozens of individual glints. Sunlight flashing off propellers, canopies, guns, and the dark bellies of low-flying fighters. Zeros, Oscars, Nates. Even lumbering two-engine bombers dragging heavy payloads. Some fly in loose formations, others scatter in a ragged swarm, but all share the same purpose. Malloy swallows hard. "We hit them before they hit the ships." Same as before. Same as before. Talmadge laughs, hollow and strangled. "There's twice as many as before." Malloy doesn't answer. His hand tightens on the stick until his knuckles turn white. Something inside him shifts, a grim, searing resolve. No matter how many there are, he will not let them through. He cannot. He banks sharply, dropping into a steep dive with Talmadge matching his roll. The wind screams over the fuselage. The rest of the cap follows, streaking downward in tight formation, guns primed. As they close the distance, the Japanese formation reacts. The first Zero breaks off into a head-on run, machine guns flashing. Tracers whip past Malloy's canopy. He flinches as a round cracks the glass inches from his face. He fires a burst in return, the Hellcat vibrating as the .50 calibers spit flame. The Zero explodes, spiraling into the sea. Two more rise in its place. Malloy curses, banking hard as another fighter dives at him with reckless aggression. The Kamikaze flies so close that Malloy glimpses the pilot's face. Young, determined, jaw set, eyes focused ahead with a chilling certainty. Malloy's heart twists. He fires again. The enemy plane blossoms into fire, breaking apart at the seams. Talmadge shouts, "More coming from your 9 o'clock!" Malloy veers sharply, catching another attacker in his sights. A quick burst, a plume of smoke, another kill. But for every kamikaze that falls, 3 seem to push forward. Below, the ships open fire again. An infernal wall of anti-aircraft fire. The fleet becomes a fortress of flame. On Bunker Hill, Harrington grips the railing as a shockwave rolls across the deck. Another destroyer in the outer ring has just taken a hit. Explosions flicker on the horizon like violent sunspots. The gunners aboard the carrier swivel urgently, targeting whatever breaks through the descending hail of cap fighters. A lone Oscar streaks low across the waves, bypassing 2 cruisers entirely. The gunners shout warnings. "He's going for Hancock! Bearing 270! The carrier USS Hancock answers immediately, her guns erupting, covering the sky in a shimmering curtain of fire. The kamikaze tries to weave. He climbs, he dips, he presses in. And then, a direct hit from a 14mm burst. The Oscar detonates in a scattering of molten fragments. A cheer rises, but it dies instantly when 3 more attackers come into view. One dives straight into the cruiser Hutchins. Another is shredded apart by cap fighters in a mid-air fireball. The third finds its mark, the destroyer USS Colquhoun, striking the bridge in an explosion so violent it sends debris arcing hundreds of feet. Harrington feels his stomach heave as the shockwave rocks Bunker Hill. The kamikazes are not stopping. If anything, the attack is intensifying. Back in the sky, Malloy's squadron is bleeding. Lieutenant Parker goes down in flames after a collision with a diving Zero. 2 pilots are missing. 1 bails out, parachute vanishing in smoke. Malloy's plane shudders as shrapnel tears through his starboard wing, smoke venting from a ruptured panel. His engine sputters, coughing. He slams the throttle forward, coaxing it. "Stay with me, girl. Just stay with me a little longer." But he sees the truth below. Despite everything the Cap is doing, despite every kill, every burst of heroic effort, too many kamikazes slip through, drawn by an unbreakable vow. A vow to die on target. Malloy freezes when he sees a Nakajima dive bomber descending at a terrifying angle toward Bunker Hill. Red 2. Break and intercept that Val. He's headed for your carrier. Malloy doesn't think. He dives so sharply his vision blurs. G-forces crush his chest. The wind screams. He fires. Misses. Fires again. Hits. But not enough. The Val smokes, trailing fire, but still descends, determined, unstoppable. No, no, no. Another Hellcat bursts in from the side. Talmadge. He rams a full burst of machine gun fire directly into the Val's engine. The bomber explodes, a violent, blinding blossom of orange and black. But Talmadge's fighter disappears with it. Malloy screams into his radio, "Joe, Joe, bail out, bail out!" No answer, only static, only flame. On Bunker Hill, men cheer when the Val is destroyed. The carrier lives another minute, another breath, another heartbeat. But Harrington's joy is gutted by the sight of the falling Hellcat. One of their own. Sacrificed so the ship could live. The Kamikazes have forced the Americans into a nightmare mirror of the enemy's tactics. Pilots dying to prevent pilots who intend to die. And the assault is still not over. Radar picks up a third wave now, then a fourth. The Japanese are emptying entire airfields in Kyushu, throwing everything they have into this catastrophic suicidal defense of Okinawa. And Harrington sees the truth, clear and merciless. The Allies had not simply underestimated the kamikaze threat. They had failed to imagine that an enemy could create a weapon powered not by machinery, but by belief. A belief strong enough to turn pilots into missiles. A belief strong enough to make the sky burn. As the next wave forms on the edge of detection, Harrington whispers a single, hollow line. How the hell do we fight an enemy that's not afraid to die? The sea offers no answer. The sky rumbles again. A new shadow forms on the horizon. The next attack is moments away. Section 4, the breaking point. April 6, 1945, 10:36 hours. Aboard USS Bunker Hill, Central Pacific. The horizon is a wall of smoke. The sea is streaked with oil, peppered with burning fragments of aircraft and twisted shrapnel. The flotsam of a battle that has stretched beyond anything the sailors of Task Force 58 have endured in 3 years of war. The sun, now high above the chaos, filters through the rising haze in dull orange shafts that cast the fleet in a sickly, distorted half-light. Lieutenant Commander James "Red" Harrington feels as though hours have passed since the first kamikaze struck. In truth, it has been just over 2. 2 hours of unrelenting violence. 2 hours of a sky that will not quiet. 2 hours in which men die in seconds and ships burn in places no fire was ever meant to reach. Below him on the flight deck, the sailors work with a frantic, almost fevered efficiency. They reload ammunition belts, shove bombs toward waiting aircraft, drag hoses, tend the wounded, and brace for the next impact that could come from any direction. A gust of wind carries a thick metallic scent. Smoke mixed with salt and burning electrical wire. Harrington inhales sharply. His chest tightens. The smell will stay with him for the rest of his life. He leans over the rail and squints into the glare. The picket ring is thinning. Destroyers and destroyer escorts, lightly armoured, lightly crewed, designed to manoeuvre, not absorb suicide hits, are paying the highest price. Harrington counts them by memory. Bush, sinking, Colhoun, aflame, Hutchins, barely staying afloat, Laffey, hammered by wave after wave, radioing for support with desperate clarity. Each loss tears at the fabric of the fleet's defence. A voice crackles over the loudspeaker. Commander George Seitz from CIC, sounding like he's shouting through gravel. Ready all guns. New wave approaching from 020 degrees. 30+ aircraft. Altitude 1500 and descending. The gunners answer with shouts that barely mask dread. A third wave, or maybe the fourth. Harrington has lost track. There are only attacks, and the seconds between them. He turns to the nearest 40mm Bofors mount, where Chief Gunner's mate Abel Torres stands braced, sweat dripping off his chin. Torres wipes his brow with the back of a greasy glove. "Sir," he mutters to Harrington, "if this keeps up, we'll need barrels made of miracles, not steel." Harrington forces a grim smile. "Then let's hope the Japanese run out before we do." Torres grunts, chambering another belt. They don't look like they plan to. Above the fleet, Ensign Peter Malloy fights the controls of his battered Hellcat, the engine coughing like an old man in winter. The cockpit reeks of hot oil and cordite. Blood drips down his right arm from a shard of canopy glass embedded in his flight suit sleeve. He barely notices the pain. 12,000 feet below him, the fleet shrinks into a cluster of tiny black silhouettes, surrounded by swirling columns of smoke. From here, the task force looks like a besieged island surrounded by a sea of flame. Malloy wipes the sweat from his brow with a trembling hand. His fuel gauge is dangerously low. He should return. Any other day, any other battle, he would have turned back long ago, but all he can see is Talmadge's Hellcat vanishing in an eruption of fire. The final desperate act of a pilot who gave his life to stop a bomber from killing the ship beneath them. Malloy grits his teeth so hard his jaw aches. No, he will not leave. Not until he has nothing left to give. He banks east, scanning for the next wave. He finds it almost immediately. A loose formation of Zeros and Oscars, flying lower than the previous groups, hugging the waves so tightly their propeller wash paints furrows across the water's surface. Behind them, a Ki-48 Lily bomber lumbers forward, its landing gear half retracted, its nose pitched slightly upward in a strange, unnatural angle. Malloy swallows. That Lily is heavy, loaded, packed with enough explosives to tear a cruiser in half. He pushes the throttle. The engine spits smoke. He pushes harder. The Hellcat groans as if begging him to reconsider. He does not. Malloy drops into a steep slope, feeling the G-forces mash him into his seat. He lines up behind the Lily, the bomber filling his gun sight as the ocean rushes by in a blue blur. He squeezes the trigger. The 50 cals chatter. Tracers streak into the Lily's fuselage. The bomber lurches, smoke pouring from its starboard engine. Malloy fires again. The Lily explodes. Flames rip through its wings. The bomber breaks apart violently, its nose shearing off. Pieces of metal spin across the waves like shrapnel skipping off a battlefield. Malloy pulls up sharply, breath ripping from his lungs. "Splash one," he whispers hoarsely. But the fighters escorting the Lily break formation, and now they're coming for him. 4 of them. Malloy's hands tighten on the controls. "Come on then," he mutters. "Let's finish this." On Bunker Hill, Harrington hears the engines first, a low vibrating hum, the sound of propellers beating the air in perfect unison. All batteries stand by. Gunners aim upward, radios crackle. The ship shifts orientation, turning slightly to maximize field of fire. Then the attackers appear, bursting over a rise of smoke like phantoms tearing through storm clouds. 8 of them, 4 high, 4 low, a 2-pronged attack. Harrington feels the hairs on his arms lift. The kamikazes have learned. They're adapting. The first 4 planes dive steeply from 1,000 feet, angling for the ship's starboard quarter. The low group skirts the waves, attempting to slip past the flak and strike from below the firing arcs. Torres shouts, "Track the low group! Track the low group!" The Bofors open fire. Roaring thunder, tracer streams lacing the air. The first low-flying Zero disintegrates instantly, blasted into a cloud of fragments. The second catches fire, but continues, flames trailing behind it like a comet. Harrington shouts, "Hit it again!" But the gunners are too slow to reorient. The burning Zero climbs, wobbling like a drunk, then dives for the destroyer Pringle. The impact is a flash brighter than noon sun. The sound reaches Bunker Hill 3 seconds later. A deep, sickening boom. A column of flame erupts from Pringle's midships. The destroyer shudders violently, then begins to break apart. Harrington grips the rail, his throat tightening. Another ship gone, another 100 men lost. The remaining kamikazes dive. One is shredded by flak. Another smashes into the sea. But the last in the high group, An Oscar slips through with terrifying precision. It angles down, straight toward Bunker Hill. Alarm bells scream, gunners howl warnings. The Oscar grows larger and larger, sunlight glinting off its canopy. Harrington whispers, "No." Torres fires the Bofors at full speed. Tracers streak. Smoke pours from the Oscar's fuselage. It wobbles, but does not fall. It keeps coming. 50 yards, 40, 30. A Hellcat dives from above. A miracle in blue. It rips the Oscar apart with a burst of gunfire. The Kamikaze explodes barely 20 yards from the carrier's flight deck, scattering metal across the bow like shrapnel thrown by a vengeful god. The blast shakes the entire ship. Harrington is thrown backward, slamming hard into the deck. Crewmen crash into railings. A shockwave pulses across the flight deck, knocking 2 sailors off their feet. As Harrington staggers upright, ears ringing, he sees the Hellcat limping away, trailing smoke. He cannot tell if the pilot is alive. He cannot see a parachute. The air smells of burning metal. A sailor near him whispers, "How many more waves can they throw at us?" Harrington has no answer. The truth is too grim. As long as the Kamikaze bases on Kyushu remain intact, the waves will continue, until every American ship is sunk, or every Japanese plane is gone. He stares toward the north, where the next threat will come. There is no silence, only the steady rumble of distant engines, growing louder. Again, Task Force 58 has reached the breaking point. And the day is far from over. Section 5, Desperate Measures, April 6th, 1945, 11:50 hours, USS Bunker Hill, Central Pacific. The flight deck is a maelstrom. Smoke curls from damaged Hellcats, mingling with the salt wind, stinging the eyes and lungs of every man on board. Fires burn stubbornly at the aft catwalk where a stray tracer ignited an ammunition crate. Deck crews, blackened with soot and sweat, wrestle hoses across warped steel, shouting to be heard over the sirens and gunfire. Lieutenant Commander James "Red" Harrington leans over the railing, binoculars scanning the horizon, stomach knotted. The sun is high now, cutting through the smoke in sharp, white streaks that reflect violently off twisted metal debris as floating in the water. A destroyer in the outer picket line shudders from the impact of a Kamikaze, the second in as many minutes, and Harrington watches, helpless, as the waves rise around it, tossing men into the sea. A young sailor stumbles past him, dragging a hose. Harrington grabs his shoulder. "Get back to your station." The sailor's eyes are wide. He nods, panting. "Sir, it's never ending." Harrington says nothing. There is no answer to that. The waves keep coming, the attacks keep coming, and every ship that falls is another mountain of dead men and twisted metal to mark the day. Below decks, in the Combat Information Center, the chaos is organized, but only just. Radar operators track hundreds of incoming contacts, their screens flickering with a blur of dots. Radio traffic overlaps with shouted orders. Cap fighters are vectored to intercept. Anti-aircraft batteries are sequenced for maximum coverage, and destroyers maneuver desperately to screen the carriers. Rear Admiral Mark Mitcher's voice comes over the net. "Priority, protect the carriers. Destroyers, engage and disrupt. Siepai, intercept inbound bogies at any cost. Gunners, fire at will. Make every shot count." Harrington notes the desperation in Mitcher's tone. He has seen the Admiral at his calmest, a man who treats warfare like a machine to be optimized. But today, even Mitcher sounds like a man who knows the rules have changed. Up in the sky, Ensign Peter Malloy dives his battered Hellcat toward yet another Kamikaze formation. He is exhausted, both physically and mentally. Sweat streams down his face, goggles fogged and smeared with black residue from the cockpit. His hands ache from gripping the stick and throttle, fingers blistered from prolonged firing. He sees the attackers now, a formation of 10 Zeros climbing from the sun, engines screaming, glinting under the glare like silver knives. His Cap squadron is scattered. Only 3 planes remain with him. One is trailing smoke badly. Another is nursing a wounded engine. Only he is fully operational. Malloy's stomach tightens. Every instinct screams to turn back, to retreat, to save his life. But every instinct forged in months of fighting the Japanese Air Force demands action. He banks sharply and dives. The first Zero plunges toward a destroyer, skimming the water. Tracer fire streaks after it, but it weaves dangerously close, weaving past shells. It crashes into the forward deck of the destroyer Dale. A blinding explosion erupting as the hull is shredded. Water and fire mingle in a deadly cloud. Jesus Christ, Malloy mutters into the radio. He fires at another attacker, a Zero that turns toward a cruiser's bridge. Machine guns roar from his wings. The Zero wobbles, smoke streaming, but it corrects, adjusting its angle. Malloy pulls up sharply, feeling the G-forces compress his chest. The cape is stretched thin. Every kill seems to open a hole elsewhere. Every downed kamikaze is replaced by another. And the pilots on the carrier decks, forced to launch continuously, are growing exhausted beyond human capacity. Back on the carrier, Harrington notes the effectiveness of the Japanese tactic. Relentless waves. They are not seeking to merely destroy ships. They are trying to exhaust the defenders. Every cap sortie, every shell fired, every gun crew burned out by fatigue is a small victory for the enemy. The task force adapts quickly. Harrington watches as officers implement desperate measures. TIAP fighters are refueled and rearmed as fast as possible, sometimes mid-deck. Destroyers adjust formation patterns to anticipate the next wave's trajectory. Radar pickets are reinforced. But even these adjustments feel inadequate against the sheer volume of attacks. A lieutenant shouts over the din, "Sir, they're coordinating. The next wave will come from multiple directions." Harrington stiffens. That means the attackers are not improvising. They are using intelligence, communication, and timing to exploit gaps in the defense. The realization sinks in with a cold clarity. They are facing an organized, deliberate kamikaze doctrine, not random suicidal sorties. At 12:25 hours, the third wave strikes. The attack is larger, more coordinated, and deadlier than the first. Kamikaze aircraft descend from high altitude in diamond formations, while low-flying fighters skirt the outer screen. The destroyer's 5-inch guns roar, tracer belts weaving deadly arcs through the sky. But the attackers adapt. They split, loop, and dive at impossible angles, seeking weaknesses. The flak bursts are magnificent and horrifying. One kamikaze is shredded mid-air in a ball of flame, and another slices through a Bofors battery, damaging the mount but failing to prevent it from firing again. Harrington sees sailors fall to the deck, dazed but alive, fighting to reload and continue. The outer screen suffers heavy losses. Destroyers sink in minutes. Survivors cling to rafts and debris, the sea now a mixture of oil, blood, and fire. The fleet reels. Harrington feels a tightening in his chest. This is no longer just a naval engagement. It is a test of endurance, nerve, and ingenuity. The American sailors are learning in real time that conventional defense tactics are barely adequate. Mitchell orders new measures. Radar pickets are shifted closer to the Japanese airfields, hoping to detect waves earlier. Cap patterns are adjusted to maximize interception. Some aircraft are diverted from strikes on Okinawa itself to reinforce carrier defense. Yet even these desperate adaptations are a stopgap. Harrington realizes it. The kamikaze threat cannot be fully countered without fundamental changes. Improved early warning, tighter fighter coverage, better coordination with destroyers, and an almost superhuman endurance from the sailors and pilots. As the fourth wave approaches, the fleet braces again. Harrington looks at the horizon and for a brief, haunting moment, imagines the ocean itself ablaze with fire and debris. He inhales sharply. There is no room for fear, only action. The next assault begins. Engines scream, tracers streak the sky, and Task Force 58 faces the unrelenting fury of an enemy that has transformed desperation into weaponized willpower. Section 6. The Cost of Valor. April 6, 1945. 13:45 hours. Off Okinawa, Pacific Ocean. By midday, The task force has become a moving island of steel and fire. The calm, turquoise waters of the Pacific now ripple with black smoke, burning oil, and floating wreckage. The waves themselves seem to recoil from the chaos above, beaten by the endless hammering of aircraft engines and the staccato stutter of anti-aircraft fire. Lieutenant Commander James "Red" Harrington leans against a bulkhead on Bunker Hill's port side, sweat and soot streaking his face. His flight jacket, once crisp, is now stained with hydraulic fluid and gunpowder residue. He feels every vibration in the deck as if it courses directly into his chest. Another destroyer has just taken a hit on the starboard side. The concussion rattles the carrier as if it were a brittle toy. Harrington watches the men below him. Gun crews reload belts of ammunition with mechanical precision, although their hands shake. Flight deck personnel sprint across slick metal, dragging hoses to extinguish small fires, ignoring the heat and smoke that bites at their lungs. Medics move among the injured, their shouts barely audible above the clamour. A junior officer staggers past Harrington, face pale. "Sir, Bush is gone. The crew, most are floating in the water." Harrington nods grimly, forcing himself not to look. There is no time to dwell on loss. Not now. Not when the next wave is forming. High above, Ensign Peter Malloy fights exhaustion. His Hellcat is damaged, one wing pockmarked with flak holes, engines sputtering. Yet he cannot turn back. Not after witnessing Joe Talmadge fall into the flames of the previous engagement. Not after seeing the destroyer Pringle obliterated. Every pilot lost. Every ship struck. Intensifies the weight pressing down on him. The radar on the carrier reports another incoming formation. 16 aircraft, combining Zeros, Oscars, and a lone Ki-48 bomber. They're approaching from multiple angles, splitting the defensive firepower. Cap fighters are already in the air, but the numbers are against them. Malloy tightens his grip on the control stick. His teeth grind. He dives, weaving through tracer streams, his mind fixed on the Japanese bomber carrying enough explosives to rip a cruiser in half. He fires. The bomber wobbles, smoke trailing from its engines, but the pilot persists. Steering straight toward the heart of the carrier formation, Malloy banks hard, firing again and again, pushing his Hellcat to the limit. The bomber explodes, a blinding blossom of orange fire, just feet from the carrier's deck. The shockwave knocks Malloy's plane off course, nearly slamming him into the ocean. He regains control, heart pounding, vision blurred. In that moment, he realizes the true cost of this battle. Every victory is Pyrrhic. Every life saved comes at the expense of another. Every bomber shot down has a price. Below on Bunker Hill, Harrington witnesses the human toll with painful clarity. Sailors are pulled from the deck, limping, bleeding, or concussed. A young seaman lies still after being struck by falling debris, medics rushing to his side with grim determination. Fire teams battle relentless flare-ups, hoses snaking across the metal like serpents. One of the ship's gunners, Chief Gunner's mate Torres, grits his teeth as he reloads a 40mm Bofors battery for the 5th time in an hour. His gloves are shredded, his uniform scorched in places, but he does not falter. Harrington watches him for a moment, admiration and sorrow mixing. The men around Torres show the same relentless determination, faces streaked with grime, eyes burning with fear and resolve. A sudden alarm pierces the din. A kamikaze has breached the outer screen, low and fast, heading straight for the carrier's aft deck. Tracers rise like angry vines. Flak blossoms erupt mid-air, and sailors brace themselves for impact. The plane explodes in a fireball, metal fragments raining down. Harrington feels the deck shudder beneath his boots. Some of the crew are thrown to the steel, bleeding but alive. Others are less fortunate. A medic calls out names, checking for consciousness, counting survivors, already knowing how many won't answer. Harrington closes his eyes for a moment. The roar of the engines, the staccato bursts of anti-aircraft fire, the screams and shouts, all merge into a single, overwhelming presence. A presence that will haunt every survivor for the rest of their lives. Across the fleet, the pattern repeats. destroyers crippled, cruisers ablaze, cat pilots falling from the sky in flaming Hellcats. Each wave brings devastation, yet the Americans adapt. Radar pickets are reinforced, guns are recalibrated, firefighting teams move with increasing speed and efficiency. Pilots rotate in and out of cap coverage, exhausted beyond human limits. Rear Admiral Mitcher watches from his flagship, tension etched into his face. He issues orders that push men and machines to their limits, improvising tactics to counter a seemingly endless stream of kamikazes. Picket stations are moved further out. KP patterns are expanded, drawing enemy aircraft away from the carriers. Anti-aircraft fire is concentrated in overlapping zones to maximize interception. It is working, barely. The fleet remains afloat, though battered and scarred. Every ship is damaged. Every deck is smeared with smoke, fire, or blood. And yet, somehow, the carriers remain central to the defensive lattice, protected by sheer resolve, skill, and courage. By mid-afternoon, Harrington feels the creeping weight of fatigue. The roar of the engines, the relentless cannon fire, the acrid smoke, it presses down on him like a physical force. He glances across the deck at the young pilots, barely more than boys, hurling themselves into the sky to intercept attackers. Their faces are drawn tight with fear and determination. Some have not returned from previous sorties. Some never will. Harrington swallows hard. He knows the numbers. For every ship hit, dozens of men are dead or injured. For every plane destroyed, another wave is forming. And yet, in the faces of those who continue to fight, he sees something that transcends fear. It is the raw, unflinching will to survive, to protect, to endure. In this moment, Harrington understands a brutal truth. Victory is not about annihilation. It is about survival, adaptation, and the courage to stand against impossible odds. The horizon rumbles again, a new formation of Japanese aircraft appearing, engines screaming, wings glinting in the harsh sun. The next wave begins its descent. Harrington exhales sharply. He braces himself. The battle for Okinawa and the nightmare of kamikaze warfare is far from over. Section 7. Adaptation under fire. April 6, 1945. 15:02 hours. Task Force 58. Waters off Okinawa. The air is thick with smoke and salt. Acrid from burning metal and aircraft fuel. The sea is choked with debris. Shattered wing sections, floating wreckage, and oil slicks glistening like black glass. Task Force 58, once a confident spearhead of American naval power, now moves like a wounded giant, battered by waves of kamikaze attacks that stretch its defenses to the breaking point. Lieutenant Commander James "Red" Harrington watches the horizon through darkened binoculars, his face smeared with soot. The sun is relentless, reflecting off the smoke in harsh, dazzling flashes. Every wave of Japanese aircraft is different, faster, lower, more unpredictable. The lessons of the morning have been brutal. The enemy studies the American response and adjusts, exploiting weaknesses that only become apparent when it's too late. Harrington's jaw tightens as he sees a Nakajima Ki-43 banking low, skimming the water to avoid anti-aircraft fire. Its pilot does not hesitate. It is clear, single-minded, a flying bomb with a human engine, intent on death and destruction. "Sir," a deck officer shouts. "They're trying to draw the cap north. A second wave's coming in low from the south." Harrington swallows. He had expected this, predicted it even, but seeing it unfold in real time brings a cold spike of fear. The fleet's outer defenses are thin, the destroyers on the picket line already battered. If this wave succeeds, another carrier or cruiser could be lost. "Vector cap to intercept," Harrington orders, his voice tight but steady. "Concentrate fire on low-flying attackers. Use proximity fuses. Hit them before they reach the ships." High above, Ensign Peter Malloy fights exhaustion like a separate enemy. His Hellcat is battered, engines sputtering, wing panels torn from previous engagements. Yet there is no thought of turning back. He dives, weaving through flak bursts, engines screaming. Each kill demands full concentration, and every missed shot could mean disaster. The new wave splits. Some attackers climb to challenge Cap fighters, drawing them away from the fleet. Others hug the waves, exploiting the blind spots in the ship's firing arcs. Malloy lines up on a low-flying Oscar moving at terrifying speed. He fires. Tracers tear into the aircraft, which lurches violently but continues its dive. Malloy curses under his breath, pulling up and swinging around for another pass. Behind him, his wingman is hit. Flames erupt from the Hellcat's fuselage. The plane spins, crashing into the sea. Malloy's stomach tightens. Every death is a weight, a reminder of the stakes, and the enormity of the kamikaze threat. On the deck of Bunker Hill, Chief Gunner's mate Abel Torres coordinates the gunners like a conductor directing a symphony of destruction. The 40mm Bofors and 5-inch guns fire continuously, shells streaking into the sky, detonating in clouds of flame around incoming aircraft. "Adjust for wind drift! Fire high! Lead the targets!" Torres shouts over the roar. "Keep them away from the carriers!" A sailor near him braces as debris from a nearby explosion rains down. Another gunner's mate collapses, smoke inhalation knocking him unconscious. Harrington moves to steady him, dragging him behind cover. Every officer, every enlisted man is improvising. Anti-aircraft fire is concentrated into overlapping zones to maximize kills. Destroyers are maneuvered unpredictably to force kamikazes to adjust their angles of attack. Cat pilots are rotated with almost inhuman efficiency to maintain air cover. The Americans are adapting, learning to fight an enemy that has no fear, no hesitation, no intent to survive. By 15:30 hours, the fourth wave has been repelled, though at great cost. 2 destroyers are sinking. Another 3 are ablaze, but still afloat. Cap has lost several aircraft, and pilots are fatigued to the point of collapse. Harrington leans against the railing, face pale. "We're holding, barely," he mutters to Torres. Torres shakes his head. "They won't stop. Not until we're all dead or they run out of planes." The Admiral's voice crackles over the radio. "We are adjusting cape patterns and reinforcing radar pickets. Prioritize carrier defense. We must survive to strike back. All hands, remain vigilant. This is far from over." Above, Malloy spots another formation approaching from the horizon. Larger, more disciplined than the previous waves. His heart tightens. The Japanese have learned from the morning attacks. They coordinate, timing their dive-bombing runs with deadly precision. He shouts into his radio, directing the remaining Cap to intercept. "Concentrate on the bombers. I'll cover low-flying attackers." He dives again, weaving through a forest of tracer fire. An enemy plane streaks past him, narrowly avoiding collision. He fires. The aircraft erupts in flames, tumbling into the sea. A sudden bright flash on the horizon catches his eye. The cruiser Colhoun succumbs to another kamikaze strike. Smoke rises in a column that seems to touch the clouds. Malloy's stomach churns, but he cannot hesitate. The battle has become a test of endurance, of adaptation, of sheer will. Every wave teaches a lesson. Every destroyed plane forces an adjustment in tactics. The Americans are learning in real time, improvising against an enemy whose defining tactic is death itself. Harrington watches the horizon, aware that every passing hour is a struggle for survival. Yet amidst the chaos, he glimpses courage. Pilots diving into the fray, gunners firing relentlessly, sailors braving fire and smoke to save the wounded. The kamikaze threat is relentless, terrifying and adaptive. And Task Force 58, battered but unbroken, is beginning to understand the price of survival in a war that has changed its rules. Section 8. The Human Toll. April 6th, 1945. 16:45 hours. Task Force 58, Okinawa. The afternoon sun casts long shadows over a battlefield of steel and smoke. Bunker Hill rocks gently in the aftermath of yet another wave of attacks. The decks slick with seawater, oil, and the residue of countless shell explosions. Fires smoulder across the ship, some stubborn and bright enough to reflect in the eyes of men who've lost too many comrades in the past hours. Lieutenant Commander James "Red" Harrington surveys the deck. noting the small clusters of sailors tending to the wounded. Blood, soot, and exhaustion mark every face. Each man moves with precision, born of drill and instinct, yet there is a haunted quality in their eyes, the recognition that no matter how skilled, no one is invulnerable. A corpsman calls out, dragging a young seaman toward the infirmary. Harrington glimpses the man's face, barely more than a boy, and the horror of the ocean, ablaze and scattered with debris, mirrored in his wide eyes. Torres, at the 40mm mount, shouts orders as another tracer-laden kamikaze skims the water below. He reloads as fast as he can, body quivering with fatigue. Harrington notices dark bruises on his forearms from repeated recoil, burns on his gloves from hot casings. Every man is showing the physical cost of holding the line. A deck officer runs by, face pale. "Sir, Colquhoun is gone. Entire crew lost." Harrington swallows, nodding grimly. He cannot dwell on the loss. There is no time to grieve while the horizon continues to ripple with enemy aircraft. High above, Ensign Peter Malloy's vision is blurred by smoke and tears. His Hellcat is barely holding together, fuselage pockmarked with flak damage, engines sputtering. Yet he cannot turn back. His mind replayed Talmadge's death endlessly since morning, and every destroyed Japanese plane reminds him of the one he couldn't save. The next wave approaches, a disciplined formation of 15, bombers flanked by agile Zeros. Malloy dives to intercept, pulling his damaged Hellcat into a steep bank. Tracer fire lashes through the sky, an infernal latticework designed to slice any pilot who ventures too far. Malloy fires repeatedly, watching a bomber spiral into the sea. Another streaks past, but a Hellcat from a fellow squadron catches it, sending it into a fireball that showers debris across the water. Every kill exacts a cost. Cat pilots are dropping out of the sky with smoke trailing behind them, some bailing out, some crashing into the waves. Malloy tightens his jaw, refusing to flinch as he dives again. Below, Bunker Hill endures yet another assault. Harrington watches as sailors scramble to douse fires, tend the wounded, and man their stations. Each kamikaze that approaches threatens death, sometimes several at once, yet the men hold their positions. Gunners firing until their arms shake uncontrollably, deck crews dragging hoses through debris-littered walkways. A flare from an anti-aircraft battery illuminates a section of deck where 3 men are trapped under a fallen metal plate. Harrington rushes over, helping lift it just enough for them to crawl free. Their faces are blackened with soot, hands scorched and bleeding, but alive. He nods to them silently, respect etched into the gesture. He notes the pattern of the attacks, organized, relentless, adaptive. Each wave hits the outer layers of defense, probing for gaps. Every surviving kamikaze teaches the fleet something about the enemy's strategy, yet the toll is evident. Every ship hit, every deck scorched, every crewman lost is a reminder that survival comes at a cost measured in human life. As evening approaches, the battle does not relent. Kamikazes continue to strike in waves, exploiting the fatigue of men and machines alike. Destroyers are sinking faster than they can be reinforced. Cat pilots are stretched to their limits, some refusing to land for refueling because they cannot abandon the sky above the fleet. Harrington notes the weight pressing on him, mental and emotional, compounded by physical exhaustion. He knows the men around him are experiencing the same pressure, yet he also sees courage, sailors risking their lives to save others, pilots diving repeatedly to intercept attackers, gunners holding their positions under fire that would have broken any normal person. A young seaman collapses beside him, coughing through smoke inhalation. Harrington steadies him, eyes scanning the horizon. Engines roar in the distance, another wave forming. He whispers to himself, voice barely audible over the chaos. How many more? How many more waves can we take? There is no answer, only the relentless approach of enemy aircraft, each one a human missile, each one carrying the threat of death. And yet, in the human response, the courage, the coordination, the refusal to yield. Harrington finds a measure of hope. The kamikaze threat is terrifying, devastating, and adaptive. But Task Force 58 is learning, evolving, and enduring. The day's battle rages on. The sky burns, the ocean smokes, and the men, battered and bleeding, continue to fight against a tactic designed to terrify, exhaust, and destroy them. Section 9. The Turning Tide. April the 6th, 1945, 18:05 hours. Task Force 58, Okinawa waters. The sun hangs low over the horizon, casting a harsh golden glow across a sea scarred with smoke and fire. The morning's chaos has evolved into a grim rhythm, waves of kamikaze attacks followed by desperate American adaptation. The task force has learned to anticipate, react, and exploit small openings in the Japanese approach, but the toll is evident. Burned decks, shattered destroyers, exhausted pilots, and sailors teetering on the brink of collapse. Lieutenant Commander James "Red" Harrington leans against the railing, his uniform streaked with grime. He watches a group of gunners recalibrate their firing angles for the next wave. Each movement is precise, almost surgical, yet born of sheer necessity. Harrington notes how the fleet has begun to coalesce into a more efficient, resilient organism, a machine learning under fire, forged from experience and desperation. "Sir," a young officer reports, voice tight. "Kiap pilots are ready. Radar picks up a large formation approaching from 060 degrees. They're coordinated, bomber heavy." Harrington nods, jaw set. "Vector fighters immediately. Prioritize bombers. Destroyers provide covering fire. No kamikaze gets through." High above, Ensign Peter Malloy pushes his Hellcat to the limit. Exhaustion clings to every muscle, yet adrenaline sharpens his senses. The approaching formation is disciplined, deliberate, a mix of Zeros escorting Nakajima bombers. The classic Kikusui formation. Malloy scans rapidly, noting the bombers' glide paths and the Zeros' sweeping patterns designed to draw cap fighters out of position. He mutters under his breath, "They're learning, just like we are." He dives, weaving between tracer fire and flak bursts, locking onto a Kai-48 bomber carrying enough explosives to obliterate a light cruiser. He fires in short, controlled bursts, shredding the fuselage. The bomber lurches violently, smoke trailing as it begins its downward spiral. A nearby Zero banks suddenly, aiming at Malloy's tail. He rolls sharply, feeling the G-forces press him into the seat, and fires. The Zero bursts into flame, dropping into the sea. Malloy exhales sharply, surveying the ocean below. A chaos of fire, debris, and motion. Every kill feels hollow, a reminder of the lives lost, but necessary for survival. Below, Bunker Hill's deck is an orchestrated frenzy. Firefighting crews move with practiced efficiency, dousing stubborn blazes, dragging hoses over slick surfaces, and removing debris to keep the flight deck operational. Gunners adjust their sights and firing sequences in real time, tracking the latest wave with grim precision. Chief Gunner's mate, Abel Torres, yells over the din. "Lead the low-flying attackers. Anticipate their descent. Don't give them an inch." A kamikaze Zero dives at the starboard side. Weaving past 40 millionth fire, another Bofors battery opens up, tearing it apart mid-air. The debris crashes into the water, sending plumes of spray skyward. Harrington feels the deck shudder with each detonation, each impact a reminder of the fragility of even the mightiest ships. Another attack vector emerges from the horizon, a group of Nates flying low, attempting to exploit gaps between destroyers. Harrington signals forward. Fire as they approach. Concentrate on low-level attacks first. Cap, intercept, high. The American response begins to crystallize. Radar pickets have been repositioned farther out, giving Cap pilots extra minutes to intercept inbound waves. Destroyers adopt irregular maneuvers, forcing kamikazes to adjust mid-run, exposing them to concentrated flak. Anti-aircraft guns are now fired in overlapping zones, maximizing hits and minimizing gaps in coverage. Mitcher, observing from the flagship, issues commands with a calm urgency. Adapt, anticipate, protect the carriers at all costs, use every resource at our disposal. The adjustments pay off. Several bombers are destroyed before reaching the fleet. Zeros are shredded mid-air. Low-flying attacks are intercepted at longer ranges. For the first time that day, a wave is partially blunted before it reaches the outer perimeter of the task force. Harrington allows himself a grim exhale. It is not victory, but it is survival, a small precious edge gained through coordination, discipline, and human endurance. High above, Malloy surveys the aftermath of his attacks. The formation he intercepted is scattering, smoke trailing from burning aircraft. Some have already plunged into the ocean. Cap has suffered losses, yes, but the Japanese are learning too slowly, adapting less quickly than the Americans who have been forced to improvise. Malloy glances at the horizon where another wave begins to rise. Even as fatigue gnaws at him, he knows the importance of relentless vigilance. Every second, every maneuver, every burst of fire could mean the difference between life and death for the fleet below. He mutters quietly, almost to himself. We've learnt to fight them. We can beat them. Just hold the line a little longer. On Bunker Hill, Harrington surveys the deck, noting the subtle changes. The ship moves more fluidly under repeated attack. Gun crews anticipate patterns. Deck teams move efficiently. Cap coordination is improving. The fleet, battered, burned, and bloodied, has begun to adapt to the unprecedented kamikaze threat. But Harrington knows the war is far from over. Okinawa is only the beginning of Japan's last desperate attempts to repel the Allies. The kamikaze tactic is horrifying, but it is not invincible. And now the Americans have learned something critical. Survival depends on constant adaptation, courage, and the willingness to endure what no man has endured before. The next wave forms on the horizon, engines screaming. The task force braces, ready to meet it head-on. Harrington whispers, a grim vow beneath the roar of the fleet. We will not break. Not today. Section 10, Nightfall and Reflection. April 6, 1945, 1903 hours. Task Force 58, Okinawa waters. Night is falling, but the chaos of battle refuses to yield to darkness. Smoke and fire streak the sky, mingling with the fading light of the sun, to create an eerie, molten glow across the Pacific. The sea is a blackened mirror, reflecting the devastation, burning oil, floating wreckage, and the silhouettes of damaged destroyers listing in the waves. The roar of anti-aircraft fire and the distant drone of engines continue unabated. Lieutenant Commander James "Red" Harrington moves across the deck of Bunker Hill, pausing to watch sailors extinguish small fires and tend to the injured. Their faces, streaked with grime, soot and blood, reflect exhaustion that has become a permanent companion. Yet, in their eyes, he sees determination, the quiet, unyielding refusal to surrender even when the odds are overwhelming. A junior officer approaches Harrington, voice low. Sir, all cap sorties are back on deck, but several aircraft are too damaged to fly again. Pilots, some are refusing to land for fear of being grounded. They want to stay in the air. Harrington nods, understanding entirely. Let them. Keep the fighters in the sky as long as possible. We'll patch planes later. Tonight, survival comes first. Above the task force, Ensign Peter Malloy glides his damaged Hellcat over the fleet, scanning for lingering threats. The enemy seems to have paused with the approach of darkness, but every shadow and flicker of movement could hide an attack. He notes the survivors, ships that remain afloat, gunners still manning their stations, and sailors moving tirelessly to prepare for another wave at dawn. His body aches from hours of continuous combat. He feels every burn, every bruise, every shot that narrowly missed him. Yet he cannot afford to rest. Even as the sky darkens, the memory of Talmadge, of the destroyers sunk, and of the countless kamikaze pilots still willing to die presses on him. Malloy glances down at the fleet, seeing the scars of the day, twisted metal, smoke rising from damaged vessels, and bodies being recovered from the water. The human cost is staggering. The psychological weight presses heavily, but amid the devastation, he notes the subtle signs of adaptation. Gunners working with newfound precision, cat patterns altered to maximize interception, and destroyers maneuvering unpredictably to disrupt enemy runs. He whispers under his breath, "We're learning, and we're surviving." On the flight deck, Harrington observes a young sailor helping another replace a damaged gun mount. The two men move with efficiency and grim determination, their exhaustion evident but overridden by duty. Harrington's eyes sweep across the deck, each crew member a testament to the endurance and courage that have kept the carriers afloat despite overwhelming odds. A fire burns near the aft elevator, smoke curling skyward. Harrington notes that no one has abandoned the task of keeping the deck operational, despite fatigue and risk. He feels a quiet awe at the human spirit he sees around him. From CIC, the radio crackles with intermittent updates. Admiral Mitchell's voice is calm, steady, and authoritative. "All hands, maintain readiness. Nightfall will not stop them. Be prepared for surprise attacks. Every ship, every gun, every plane is a line in our defense. Hold fast." Harrington nods silently. The calm, almost clinical command from Mitchell is a contrast to the chaos that surrounds them, but it embodies the discipline that has allowed the fleet to endure. As darkness deepens, the survivors of Task Force 58 finally find moments to reflect. The day has cost dozens of ships damaged or destroyed, hundreds of men wounded or dead, and countless KP pilots lost. The kamikaze tactic has revealed its terrifying effectiveness, forcing adaptation and testing the limits of courage and endurance. Yet, in this crucible of fire and smoke, the Americans have begun to learn. Radar pickets, keep coordination, overlapping anti-aircraft fire, and improvised maneuvers have started to blunt the effectiveness of the suicidal waves. For the first time, it seems possible to not only survive, but to fight back in a methodical, calculated manner. Harrington leans on the railing, looking out over the darkened waters. He feels the weight of the day, the horror, the losses, the fear, but also a spark of grim hope. The kamikaze threat is real, adaptive, and deadly. But the Americans have endured. They have survived. They have learned. He whispers into the wind, almost to himself. Tomorrow, we fight smarter, we fight harder, and we survive. The night is far from quiet. Fires burn across the horizon, and distant engines hum with deadly intent. But for now, Task Force 58 remains afloat, battered but unbroken, and the Allies have learned a bitter, inescapable truth. The kamikaze is more than a weapon. It is a test of human endurance, courage, and ingenuity. Section 11. Lessons of Okinawa. April 7th, 1945. Use 600 hours. Task Force 58, Okinawa waters. Dawn breaks over a sea scarred with yesterday's destruction. Smoke still lingers in the air, a dull grey haze mingling with the early morning sunlight. The ocean reflects both the calm of the new day and the scars of battle. Sunken destroyers, floating debris, and small islands of oil slicks glinting ominously. The fleet, battered but intact, moves with measured precision, each ship aware of the dangers that have yet to end. Lieutenant Commander James "Red" Harrington stands on Bunker Hill's deck, binoculars in hand, surveying the horizon. The first waves of Japanese aircraft have already been detected on radar, smaller, more tentative, likely reconnaissance probing the defences. Harrington notes how Task Force 58 has begun to internalise the lessons of the previous day. Radar pickets are reinforced, positioned at staggered intervals to maximise early warning. SEAP fighters have new patrol patterns, designed to intercept attackers before they reach the fleet. Anti-aircraft gunners move with greater efficiency, now anticipating the deceptive dives, low-altitude runs, and coordinated formations that kamikaze pilots employ. Harrington feels a cautious sense of confidence. The fleet is learning to fight the kamikaze threat, adapting in real time under the harshest of circumstances. But he knows that confidence is fragile. The enemy has proven willing to die to inflict maximum damage. High above, Ensign Peter Malloy prepares for another sortie. His Hellcat, patched overnight, is ready, though Malloy himself feels every muscle screaming from exhaustion. Yet he knows that if he does not fly, someone else will face the kamikazes alone. He breathes deeply, scanning the horizon for the first signs of movement. The approaching formation consists of a dozen Zeros and a pair of Ki-48 bombers. The Japanese have adjusted, flying lower, changing approach vectors, and attempting to outmaneuver Cap intercepts. Malloy grits his teeth. He has flown countless sorties now, each one a deadly dance against human-guided missiles. Each mission hones his instincts, sharpens his reflexes, and reminds him of the lives depending on him below. He dives, joining other Cap fighters, weaving through tracer fire and lining up on a bomber. The Hellcat shudders under rapid maneuvers. He fires, bringing the bomber down in a streak of flame and debris. The explosion rocks the water below, sending up a column of smoke that blends with the rising sun. For the first time in days, Malloy feels a flicker of hope. The adaptations made by the Americans are beginning to work. On the deck, Harrington observes subtle improvements. Gunners track targets with increased precision, leading low-flying aircraft in a manner that anticipates their evasive dives. Destroyers maneuver in irregular patterns, making it difficult for kamikazes to maintain a consistent attack vector. SAP pilots coordinate closely with radar pickets, allowing early interceptions that prevent bombers from reaching the carriers. A young sailor collapses from fatigue, and Harrington hurries to help him. He feels the physical weight of exhaustion, a heaviness that has settled over the fleet like a living thing. Yet he also feels the intangible weight of morale, strengthened by the visible effectiveness of their adaptations. The men are beginning to see that survival is possible. Admiral Mitcher's voice comes over the radio, calm but resolute. All hands, maintain vigilance. Yesterday has taught us lessons we cannot ignore. Today we apply them. Every ship, every gun, every plane, this is how we survive. Fight smart, fight coordinated, fight unyielding. The morning passes with measured intensity. Sporadic kamikaze attacks test the fleet's new tactics, but the results are clear. Several aircraft are intercepted before reaching the carriers, and gunners destroy planes attempting low-altitude approaches. Ships remain intact. Fire teams manage minor outbreaks efficiently, and cap sorties rotate with meticulous timing. Harrington notes the human factor, the endurance of sailors and pilots who, despite exhaustion and trauma, continue to adapt. The fleet's ability to survive is no longer accidental. It is methodical. Each success builds confidence, each failure teaches a lesson, and each adaptation narrows the gap between life and death. By mid-morning, the first signs of a turning tide are evident. The Japanese continue to mount attacks, but the Americans anticipate patterns, exploit weaknesses, and adapt faster than the enemy can modify their approach. For the first time, the fleet seems to have wrested control of the engagement, demonstrating that even in the face of the terrifying kamikaze tactic, survival and victory are achievable. Harrington surveys the horizon, noting the calm determination of men who have endured hell and emerged stronger, if scarred. He thinks of the losses, the ships sunk, the men killed, the pilots who never returned, and acknowledges that the battle is far from over. But he also recognizes a critical truth. Through coordination, courage, and adaptation, the Americans have begun to meet the kamikaze threat not just with resistance, but with mastery. The lessons of Okinawa, etched in fire, blood, and steel, are now being applied. The Allies have begun to understand that survival depends on learning faster than the enemy, on endurance stronger than fear, and on the unshakable resolve of men facing death with unwavering determination. The horizon remains tense, filled with the potential for disaster, but for the first time, the Americans feel the possibility of hope. Section 12. Hard-earned resilience. April 7th, 1945, 1330 hours. Task Force 58, Okinawa waters. The sun climbs higher, illuminating the fleet's battered but resolute form. Smoke still drifts from damaged destroyers and cruisers, and the sea remains scattered with debris from the kamikaze attacks of the previous day. The air is thick with the scent of burning fuel, salt and metal, yet there is a change, subtle, almost imperceptible, in the rhythm of Task Force 58. Lieutenant Commander James "Red" Harrington walks along the flight deck, surveying the men. They are exhausted, faces blackened by smoke and sweat, hands blistered, uniforms torn, and yet they move with efficiency, anticipating each command, each incoming aircraft, each burst of anti-aircraft fire. The fleet is no longer reacting blindly, it is learning, adapting, and responding with deliberate precision. "Sir," a deck officer calls, pointing toward the horizon. "Another formation, 6 aircraft, low approach, they're probing again." Harrington nods, binoculars raised. "Vector cap to intercept immediately. Gunners, prioritize low-altitude attack arcs. Destroyers, maintain irregular maneuvers. Let's see if they can break us today." High above, Ensign Peter Malloy's Hellcat rises into the morning sky. He is weary. Every muscle aches. Every nerve burns. Yet he steels himself. The formation ahead is small but coordinated. A pair of Ki-43 Oscars with a lone Ki-48 bomber. The enemy pilots have learned from yesterday's failures, adjusting altitude and approach angles, attempting to exploit perceived weaknesses. Malloy dives, weaving between flak bursts, tracer streams streaking past him like lightning. He lines up on the bomber first, firing controlled bursts. The plane shudders, smoke trailing from its port engine. He holds steady, pulling the trigger again. The bomber erupts in flames, crashing into the sea with a towering splash. A Zero attempts to intercept him, but Malloy anticipates its climb, rolling his Hellcat with a precision born of countless engagements. He fires, sending the aircraft into a spinning inferno, pieces of fuselage tearing across the ocean. He exhales, heart pounding, noting the effectiveness of their new tactics. Cap coordination, radar-assisted interception, and concentrated anti-aircraft fire from below. Survival is becoming methodical, learned, and repeatable. On Bunker Hill, Chief Gunner's mate Abel Torres oversees the 40mm mounts with a steady hand. The gunners, though exhausted, fire with practiced precision, covering low and mid-altitude attack paths. The destroyers maneuver unpredictably, drawing enemy aircraft into concentrated flak zones. Radar operators call in early warnings, giving pilots extra seconds to intercept. Harrington watches quietly, noting the subtle improvements. Men are moving faster, reacting more efficiently, trusting their training and each other. The fleet's survival no longer depends solely on luck or brute endurance. It is the result of human adaptation, learning, and cohesion forged under fire. A sailor collapses nearby, body trembling from fatigue. Harrington helps him to his feet. "Take 5, then back to your post," he says. The sailor nods, eyes wide but resolute. Understanding that rest is temporary, duty is constant. Throughout the day, sporadic kamikaze attacks test the fleet's new resilience. Some planes are intercepted high by cap fighters, others shredded mid-air by concentrated flak. A few reach destroyers, causing localized damage, but no carriers are lost. The pattern is evident. The Americans are learning faster than the Japanese can adapt. The deadly calculus of suicide tactics, once overwhelming, is now being mitigated by strategy, coordination, and human ingenuity. Harrington reflects on the losses of the previous day. The Bush, the Colhoun, the Pringle, and countless lives. Each ship lost was a harsh lesson, each casualty a painful teacher. Yet the fleet survives. The survivors have endured, adapted, and now operate with a unity and precision that would have been impossible 24 hours ago. By evening, Task Force 58 moves as a coordinated organism. Tap fighters rotate with near-perfect timing, gunners track with preemptive adjustments, and radar pickets provide early warnings that allow pilots and ships to prepare. Fires are controlled swiftly, Damage is managed efficiently, and the men continue to stand, weary, scorched but unbroken. Harrington leans against the railing, watching the sun set behind columns of smoke. He feels the weight of exhaustion, grief, and the relentless strain of battle, but also a hardened sense of pride. The fleet has learned. The kamikaze threat, terrifying in its scope and intent, is no longer an unstoppable force. Survival is possible through discipline, adaptation, and sheer human endurance. He whispers quietly, almost to himself, "We've learned how to fight them, and we will survive." Above, the sky darkens. Engines hum on the horizon, a reminder that the threat is far from gone. Yet, for the first time since the battle began, there is a sense that Task Force 58 can endure, adapt, and ultimately prevail. Section 13. The day after the Inferno. April 8th, 1945. 0600 hours. Task Force 58. Waters off Okinawa. The morning light reveals the battered remnants of a once pristine fleet. Smoke still rises from scorched decks. Hulls bear the scars of kamikaze attacks, and the water reflects black streaks of fuel and shattered debris. Yet the ships remain afloat, battered, yes, but defiant, their crews exhausted, yet unbroken. Lieutenant Commander James "Red" Harrington surveys the fleet from Bunker Hill's bridge. The previous day's engagements have left no doubt of the Japanese strategy, relentless waves of suicide attacks, exploiting every opening, testing every sailor's courage. But the Americans have adapted. The fleet moves with precision, coordination sharper than it was yesterday, and each crew member operates with grim, practiced efficiency. "Sir," a deck officer reports, voice tight with fatigue, "no major attacks detected overnight. The enemy is probing slowly. Cap fighters and radar pickets have maintained coverage without incident." Harrington nods, jaw tight. "Good, but remain vigilant. They are learning too. Don't underestimate them." High above, Ensign Peter Malloy stretches his legs in the cockpit, eyes scanning the horizon for movement. His Hellcat, patched and repaired overnight, is ready, though he is every bit as worn as his aircraft. The previous day's sorties have left him fatigued, muscles aching, nerves frayed. Yet there is a steely resolve in his expression, a determination to face whatever comes, knowing that each flight is a fight not only for survival, but for the men below on the deck. The radar picks up a small formation approaching from the northwest, 3 Zeros and a KAIS-43. They are testing the defences, flying low to avoid detection. Malloy adjusts his flight path, preparing to intercept. As he dives toward the incoming aircraft, he notes the coordination between KP and the fleet below. Gunners adjust preemptively, destroyers maneuver irregularly, and radar operators provide precise vectors. This synchronization was absent just 48 hours ago. Today, it is a shield forged in fire, smoke, and human willpower. Below, on Bunker Hill, Chief Gunner's mate Abel Torres oversees the 40mm and 5-inch batteries with practiced eyes. The gunners are exhausted, but their aim is precise, honed by the lessons of the previous day. They track the low-flying Zeros and the Kai-43 bomber, firing controlled bursts to maximize interception. The first Zero is shredded mid-air. The bomber takes flak damage and spirals into the sea. The remaining Zero breaks off, retreating. Harrington watches quietly, acknowledging the significance. These attacks, which would have wreaked havoc yesterday, are now being countered effectively. A young sailor, barely more than a boy, leans against the railing, trembling. Harrington approaches, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You're doing fine," he says quietly. "All of you are. We survived yesterday. We'll survive today." Throughout the morning, sporadic kamikaze attempts test the fleet's improved defences. A bomber approaches at high altitude, but Kiap intercepts it before it reaches the carriers. A low-flying Nate attempts a dive run, only to be shredded by concentrated 40mm fire from 2 destroyers working in tandem. Each interception demonstrates that adaptation, coordination, and vigilance can blunt even the most determined suicide attacks. Harrington notes the human factor. Endurance, courage, and rapid learning under fire have become as important as guns, planes, and radar. Task Force 58 has become a unit operating not just on orders, but on instinct, experience, and shared resolve. By midday, the fleet has stabilized, fires are controlled, minor damage is managed, and cat pilots rotate with discipline, conserving energy for inevitable future attacks. Harrington moves across the deck, observing the men and officers who have endured the inferno of kamikaze waves and survived. There is quiet pride, tempered by grief for those who did not return. Every ship lost, every sailor killed, has left a mark, yet the survivors continue to operate with efficiency and courage. Lessons have been learned: early warning, overlapping anti-aircraft coverage, KIAP coordination, and unpredictable maneuvering have transformed Task Force 58 from a reactive force into a resilient, adaptive one. Harrington surveys the horizon. The Japanese may yet attempt another wave. The kamikaze tactic is far from spent, but for the first time, the Americans feel they have begun to master the threat. Survival is no longer a matter of luck alone. It is a product of human ingenuity, endurance, and coordinated action. He whispers, almost to himself, as he watches smoke rise from distant wreckage. We've paid the price, but we've learned, and we will endure. The sun climbs higher, glinting off scarred decks and smoke-streaked waters. Task Force 58 sails forward, battered, vigilant, and unbroken, a testament to adaptation under fire, resilience under terror, and the unyielding courage of men facing a tactic designed to kill without mercy. Section 14, Facing the Unthinkable, April 8th, 1945, 16:30 hours. Task Force 58 waters off Okinawa. The late afternoon sun casts long shadows across the fleet, turning smoke and fire into streaks of molten gold. The ocean is still littered with debris, twisted metal, shattered aircraft, and fragments of the destroyers that had borne the brunt of the kamikaze attacks. The horizon, though quieter than in the past 2 days, remains tense with the possibility of renewed assault. Lieutenant Commander James "Red" Harrington moves along the deck, observing sailors and gunners as they prepare for yet another potential wave. The previous days have exacted a heavy toll, ships damaged, men killed or wounded. Yet the fleet operates with a cohesion born of necessity. Every crewman now knows their role, not only in procedure, but in survival. Radar pickets report an incoming formation, a small Kikusui strike, attempting to test the fleet's endurance. Cat pilots scramble and gunners adjust preemptively. Harrington notes that while the enemy is deadly and relentless, the Americans are no longer caught off guard. Every attack is met with learned anticipation, every maneuver informed by experience under fire. High above, Ensign Peter Malloy pushes his Hellcat hard, racing to intercept. The Japanese dive in waves, precise and lethal, yet each is met with overlapping gunfire and disciplined fighter cover. Malloy engages a bomber, sending it spiraling into the sea, then rolls sharply to intercept an approaching Zero. The sky is a chaotic ballet of life and death, yet Malloy's focus is razor sharp, fueled by exhaustion, adrenaline, and a will to survive. On the deck, Chief Gunner's mate Abel Torres coordinates the gunners with near-military choreography. Every shell fired has a purpose, every movement calculated to protect the carriers. The men's coordination is no longer raw instinct alone. It is a hard-earned refinement of strategy tested under the most extreme conditions. Harrington observes the subtle signs of resilience. Fire teams operate efficiently, even under extreme fatigue. Deck crews repair minor damage immediately. Pilots rotate for refueling and rearmament, conserving strength for repeated sorties. Task Force 58 is no longer merely surviving. It is responding, adapting, and learning in real time. By nightfall, the last of the day's kamikaze waves has been repelled. The fleet is scarred, yet intact. Harrington walks the deck slowly, pausing to acknowledge the exhausted men. faces blackened with soot, hands blistered, eyes haunted by what they have witnessed. Yet there is pride beneath the exhaustion. They have endured the unthinkable and survived. In CIC, Admiral Mitchell reports over the radio, "All units, maintain readiness overnight. Today, we have survived because of your courage and adaptation. Tomorrow, we remain vigilant. The enemy will not relent, and neither will we." Harrington leans against the railing, watching the sun sink into a smoke-streaked horizon. For the first time since the Kamikaze threat emerged, he feels a measure of control. Survival is no longer chance. It is the product of endurance, training, and human will. Section 15. Lessons carved in steel and fire. April 9th, 1945. 0700 hours. Task Force 58. Okinawa waters. The aftermath of relentless kamikaze attacks is visible in every scarred hull, burned deck, and exhausted face. Yet amidst the wreckage, the lessons of Okinawa are clear. Task Force 58 has endured, learned, and adapted in ways that few could have imagined. The fleet's survival is no longer a matter of luck. It is a testament to coordination, courage, and human ingenuity in the face of unprecedented terror. Lieutenant Commander James "Red" Harrington surveys the fleet one last time, noting the subtle but crucial changes. Destroyers move with unpredictable patterns. Gunners fire in overlapping zones to maximize interception. Cap fighters coordinate precisely with radar pickets. And the men below operate with discipline, honed through fire and loss. The kamikaze tactic, terrifying in its simplicity and ruthlessness, has been met with methodical countermeasures born in the crucible of combat. High above, Ensign Peter Malloy flies over the fleet, Hellcat engines whining against the morning wind. He watches as ships rise and fall in the waves, crews moving efficiently across decks, gunners tracking potential threats with steady hands. The human element, courage, endurance, and adaptability is the shield that now protects the fleet as much as steel and firepower. Harrington walks across Bunker Hill's deck, acknowledging sailors who meet his gaze with a mixture of exhaustion and quiet pride. The cost of survival is evident. Dozens of ships damaged or destroyed, hundreds of men lost, and countless more physically or mentally scarred. Yet what endures is the human capacity to adapt, to learn, and to survive even under the most extreme circumstances. He pauses, reflecting on the kamikaze threat, an enemy tactic designed to break morale, induce chaos, and exploit fear. It was deadly, horrifying, and seemingly unstoppable. And yet, Task Force 58 has met it, endured it, and begun to master it. Every adaptation, every coordination, every courageous act has transformed despair into resilience. Admiral Mitchell's voice echoes through the ship's communication system one final time. This battle is far from over, but the lessons are clear. Courage, coordination, and adaptation are our greatest weapons. Never underestimate the enemy, but never doubt your ability to endure. Harrington looks out over the horizon, the sun climbing higher. The ocean is calm now, a deceptive serenity above waters that have witnessed infernos and death. He knows the kamikaze threat remains, but so does the spirit of those who have survived it. The Battle of Okinawa would continue, and the Allies would carry the scars and lessons forward. But Task Force 58, battered, bloodied, and exhausted, has proven that even the most terrifying, human-driven weapon cannot break determination forged in steel, fire, and courage. Harrington whispers, voice barely audible over the gentle roar of the sea. We have endured, and we will continue to endure. The horizon stretches endlessly, a testament to survival, adaptation, and the indomitable human spirit.